You're watching West Hartford Community Television.
You're watching West Hartford Community Television.
You're watching West Hartford Community Television.
For the community, by the community.
I honestly never expected to have a job again. I thought that my career had started to phase out. People are pliable, are resilient, and that you can take what you've learned from one situation and easily apply it to another.
Imagine a 60-something Caucasian male moving to Hartford for a new job. And then imagine that job ending. We're talking no connections, no job, and a mortgage on a new home. Well, that person is the president of the Jewish Federation of Greater Hartford, one of the top positions in Jewish communal service in the area. He had absolutely no experience and no education in Jewish leadership. I'm Pat Kazakov. You're watching Shalom Hartford. Stay with me and we're going to meet that man, Howard Savronsky. Is that true?
It's all true. Hard to imagine, but it's all true.
So let's flash back to growing up. Tell me a little bit about your background.
So you're talking to a person of the 60s and about flashbacks. Okay, first of all.
Not a good word?
Well, it has different connotations
To
based
different
on your
people.
age. Right,
Got it.
right, absolutely. I grew up in New York, in the city, in Queens, and had a relatively normal life. Went to Israel, actually, as a sophomore at Tel Aviv University, primarily because I had no other choice. It was either that or be drafted and going to Vietnam.
So did you graduate Tel Aviv University?
No, I dropped out of college. I was there for 4 months and realized I really didn't want to be a student. And I spent the next 3 months hitchhiking through Europe until it got too cold. And all I had were summer clothes because I was going to be in Israel, and it was a rather, very different climate there. And came home to a very disappointed mother and father.
No degree?
No degree.
No degree from an American university?
No,
either.
I actually only completed my freshman year of college. And I had a few credits that I was able to get while I was in Israel, and came back and decided I was going to go out and find my own way in the world.
So how old were you about then?
I was 19.
So you're 19 years old, you don't have a good degree, you don't have an education, but you have clothes.
I have clothes, I had a guitar, and I had hair that was growing exponentially longer and longer.
So what did you do with that experience?
I decided that I needed to find a job, but I also knew that I needed to go back to school. I mean, I had not given up on my education. It was just that I had to find the right time where my educational goals would fit into my lifestyle, my life goals.
Were you conscious at that time, like right now we're bringing words to it, but were you conscious at that time that you needed an education, or were you sort of floating around?
No, I knew I needed an education.
You knew that.
I grew up, neither of my parents went to college. They were both working class folks with commercial high school degrees. I would be the first person in my immediate family to go to college. I knew that was something I was going to do, but I was going to do it at my own pace.
So then what happens?
So I start working, getting odd jobs, and I decided I really wanted to do something to work in my community. And at that point, I was really interested in working with youngsters, with teenagers.
So you had the communal...
I had some idea. I had been very active younger in USY. I had gone to Camp Ramah. So I had a strong connection with teenagers and young people. And I felt that I had a particular skill in communicating with people.
Did you have a big experience in being Jewish? Was that important to you at that time?
It was up until the time I went to Israel, but by the time I got back from Israel, it wasn't
Not so
prominent.
much.
It wasn't prominent in my life.
So, so now you're interested in these adolescents. You have this sort of
I have this vague idea, and I hear about a peer counseling hotline program at Queens College. And I was already making plans to go back to school at night. I was working in various odd jobs, and I went in to interview it was called Oz. OZ, after The Wizard of Oz. And it was a part of a national network of, at that point, suicide hotlines were very popular on campuses. And I went in and I sort of told them what I was interested in doing. In the middle of my interview, in walked a young woman who I recognized from high school, who did not recognize me because by then I had long hair and a beard.
Right, right.
And she came in and to grab a cigarette, and I said, "Hi, Ruth," and she looked at me, "Who the hell are you?" And I said, "I know all about you." She later became my wife. I met my wife at that. So we go back to high school, actually.
So you're now working
So
in
I'm
the
working at the
suicide.
Suicide Hotline, and we're really at the cutting edge of working with young people on the streets, counseling people about on their emotional difficulties, developing drug prevention programs.
Now, why do you think you were interested in this suicide business, in the drug prevention?
It was 1969, and I was surrounded by friends who were very actively engaged in the drug culture, and I witnessed, unfortunately, too many of them either committing suicide or being negatively impacted by their drug use. So I had a particular interest in trying to work with people who were suffering both emotionally and by using drugs and substances.
Did you have any drug addiction issues?
No. Personally, no.
And what about those, like you said that many of your friends had that. Did you have anybody closer than a friend who had that?
I had close friends who, were both experimenting as well as being heavily involved in drugs. It was a time where people were looking to get out of the military. I was in the first draft back in '68. More and more people were turning to drugs as a way of getting deferments.
So now you're working at the suicide hotline, and the way you're talking, it seems like you enjoyed that. Like you just liked it. I can feel
it really fulfilled a very deep-seated desire in me. It was very satisfying because not only was I working and helping people, but I became part of a small community of college students, of faculty, who were all driven by a particular mission, which was to reduce suicide in our community and help young people who were struggling, both in high school kids as well as college kids. It was college-based, but it was community-wide.
So did that lead you back to college?
So I started going back to school at night. I was on the hotline, oftentimes I had the midnight to 3 o'clock in the morning shift. Sometimes it would, depending on what my schedule was like. I was also driving a cab in New York City. And then about 6 of us decided that we wanted something more. We heard that the federal government was looking to establish a drug prevention training program. And along with our faculty advisor, we spent 6 months in my friend's apartment and wrote a grant. And we got $250,000.
How old were you when this happened?
I was 20.
You were 20 years old.
20 years old. I became the director of training for the Metropolitan Training Institute. My wife became the liaison officer. Roy became the director of finance. Jerry became the director of the Training Institute. And none of us were over the age of 30 at that point.
So you're sort of deeply involved in mental health, and you're a leader. I mean, you must have felt that you were a leader.
I knew I had leadership potential. I mean, I was vice president of METNA USY when I was 16. So I always gravitated to positions that would allow me to influence organizations. And I always found that very satisfying. I didn't see myself as a politician.
Well, it's sort of funny that you should say that, because you're in your new job, being a politician is part of it on some level.
But in a prior job, it was a largely part of my work. I was, mental health commissioner for 9 years on Long Island.
So how does one get from the suicide hotline to the commissioner of mental health in Nassau County? How does that happen?
It was an interesting journey. It was not planned, let me just tell you that. From the Training Institute, I went back to school, got a master's degree in social work and clinical social work, had various positions along the way, and decided that I needed to complete my graduate training. I convinced the commissioner at that point to take me on as a student. After a year there, they offered me a job. I worked at the Department of Mental Health for over 27 years. moving up gradually. I was head of their community support program, then I ran their forensic unit. My specialty is in forensic mental health, and I set up the first correctional mental health program in Nassau County, became a statewide consultant, and was very happy doing what I was doing until I got that fateful call one Friday afternoon from the county executive saying that the commissioner is retiring and your name has been put into the pool, and I'd like to offer you the job as commissioner of the Department of Mental Health and Developmental Disabilities, which is something you can't say no to.
Well, given where you came from, I mean, if we backtrack, you didn't graduate college in the normal way
No.
of graduating college. Then you go to suicide hotline. Then you become a social worker, and now you're the commissioner of mental health. How does that happen?
Sometimes I sat, oftentimes late at night, scratching my head saying,
So
you know.
if you were looking back, and now you have the benefit of being able to look back, what would you think were the qualities that sort of put you in that position? Because there's only one commissioner of mental health.
There's only one commissioner.
There's not a lot.
Yeah.
So only you were chosen to do that at that time. Why? Can you bring words to that? Why you?
I always tried to be authentic in my relationships, tried to be conciliatory in the way I dealt with people. And I guess those skills and that approach that I had to both organizations and to management and my interpersonal stuff was appealing to those people in senior leadership. Like any organization, they took a risk on me, and I took a risk in taking a job that I didn't really feel fully prepared for.
And how does that feel, like not to be fully prepared?
It was scary. It was really scary. I mean, the commissioner who hired me was the same age as my father. Mm-hmm. And we had a very rocky relationship the first couple of years. And I always saw him as bigger than life, you know. And here I was, it was 20 years later, sitting at his desk, in his chair, in his office, fulfilling that role. By the way, we're still friends. He's just turned 98. Mm-hmm. He's in Phoenix, and we still communicate on Facebook, if you can imagine.
So we take that history, and then we fast forward, and I'm seeing a repetition of history, because you became the president of the Jewish Federation. You had no experience in Jewish communal leadership. You don't have a degree in Jewish communal leadership. I mean, basically, it seems to be you had the same skills as commissioner as you, like what? How did that happen?
Well,
how did you get that job?
Because, the job found me. I had come up here for another job in the mental health field and lost that job. Agency reorganized and they eliminated my position. I started networking as part of my strategy.
And what does that mean, networking?
It meant that I went to actually one of the Federation supported programs, JETS, which is the Jewish Employment Transition Service, that helps people who are in transition. I started going and meeting people, getting my resume out.
As a person who was previously a commissioner, I mean, that's a really heady position, and you must have been with a lot of heady people and big shots, big shots. And now you're networking at JETS. How does that feel?
It felt awkward, and I felt like a fish out of water because I was looking for positions that were not readily available. I was looking for executive, and at that point I gave up actually, and I started my own consulting business, which is what I was doing, and very satisfied doing what I was doing until I got a call from somebody from the Federation who actually is involved with JETS, who had gotten my name from somebody in her network who knew that I was out there. I was somebody with senior level management experience, with nonprofit work experience. They thought I was Jewish. They figured,
it's a good guess.
It's a good guess. I got the right name.
But it's not 100%.
You can't be certain these days. You can't be certain. And I got a call one afternoon saying, would you be interested in coming in and talking to us?
So let me ask you, a person like yourself, when someone like you goes for a job interview, do you say to them, I was commissioner of mental health? Because clearly that's a higher job than anybody that's interviewing you has ever had. How do you get that into the conversation?
It's on my resume, first of all, so it's nothing hidden. And I talk about mostly my journey So it's not about that position that I held, but it's about all that led up to that position, and it's all the skills that I acquired, all the experiences that I cataloged in my life that contributed to who I am.
So you get that phone call, and she says to you, would you like to interview for this job? And you say, sure.
I said, I'll come in and talk. I was intrigued not because it was Jewish, but because they were looking for somebody to come in as a change agent, and because the organization was looking to change their approach, their branding, their vision, and their perception in the community. And to me, that's the most exciting thing. I have a degree in social work, but my specialty was in community organizing. I taught community organization for 2 years at graduate school. So I'm very interested and passionate about being a change agent in community.
What about the Jewish business? How did that hit
Well,
you?
the Jewish business, I've always had a commitment to my Jewish heritage. Even though I wasn't active in the Jewish community, Ruth and I were founding members of our synagogue on Long Island. I was busy in my professional career, so I was not actively involved at the synagogue. But both of my kids, we would go on Shabbat, and we had a kosher home.
So the Jewish business wasn't foreign to you?
It was not foreign at all.
The business of Jewish.
The business was completely foreign.
Right.
I had never done that.
But being Jewish was not
No.
an environment that you didn't feel good in. You
I-
felt good.
I feel good. I feel comfortable. I grew up in an observant, quasi-observant conservative home. I had a strong Jewish background early on. I spoke a little bit of Hebrew. I could manage in a synagogue. I can get through the prayers. I can daven like anybody. So that stuff was not foreign to me. But I got to tell you that this whole experience has allowed me to reconnect in a way that I may not have had I not taken this job.
Well, you look like you're very happy in this
I
job.
am.
You seem very relaxed. So tell me, how's the job?
The job is great. The job is great, and what's even better is being part of this community. Because coming from New York, it's a small fish in a big pond. And being commissioner, I was overseeing a county of 1.3, half the size of Connecticut. Nassau County is 1.3 million people, and never felt a strong connection to my local community. But there's something very unique about living here in Hartford. We've got all of the attributes that we would like to see when we were in New York are here. Smaller scale, but we're finding that West Hartford in particular is most welcoming. The community has embraced us, and I'm most excited that the community has embraced a sense of urgency in terms of change in positioning the Federation for the future.
You're now the president of the Jewish Federation, and you seem to be enjoying the position. Very few people go from no experience in Jewish communal leadership to becoming the top dog in the Jewish business. What would you tell somebody? What would you tell somebody who is looking for a job, who's in his 60s? It's not a usual phenomenon.
No. I honestly never expected to have a job again. I thought that my career had started to phase out. I was doing my part-time consulting work, looking forward to Social Security, and when this thing came. So part of what I would, advise people. I'm a former therapist. I don't like to use the word advise.
What do they use, counsel?
Well, I have to charge you then, right?
Fine. I can afford it.
Both my wife and myself found ourselves in a similar situation of having to reinvent oneself, is to embrace the change, embrace the fear, recognize the strengths that you have collected over the years of experience that you've acquired, that be confident in your own self-worth, that people are pliable, are resilient, and that you can take what you've learned from one situation and easily apply it to another. And don't get caught up on labels. Just because the job says you're president of the Jewish Federation doesn't mean that somebody with years of experience of doing senior management, working in organizations, working in nonprofit sector, working with people, can't apply those skills in this particular job. I have a lot of friends in my situation who are sort of giving up.
Well, it's not an unusual situation.
It's not an especially in this economy.
Right.
You know, especially in this economy. More and more people my age are finding themselves being, excised out of their jobs or whatever. Embrace the change.
So you said before, you said embrace the fear.
Right.
What does that look like? Some behaviors that would translate into embracing the fear?
Well, part of it I find, is to go into the situation and listen. People that, like myself, who are at this point of their career, are very quick to go in and be able to demonstrate how much they know and be very arrogant and, tell people how they are going to do certain things. I found that, for me anyway, the important piece that allowed me to be successful was to be able to listen and hear what people had to say, what people expected of me, of the institution that I was now stewarding, and then for me to be able to, as I said, pull from the smorgasbord of skills that I've acquired to see what works and what would help. The other thing is, take a deep breath. You're going to make mistakes. We all make mistakes, whether it's our first job or the last job of our career. But that's okay. And we have to be willing to risk. And because the only way we're going to change and move the needle in any organization and community is to take that risk, both personally as well as a community.
So do you feel completely comfortable in this new position? Are you completely at one with it? Or is there still a bit of fear?
Oh, I haven't even been doing this 2 years yet. So yeah, every day I wake up.
There's a little fear.
It's a little fear, It's not like I'm selling, toothpaste. This is a product line that is sometimes very intangible. We're talking about, selling the umbrella organization of the Jewish community, the continuity of our Jewish community, succession planning and leadership and allocation of funds.
It's a little amorphous.
It's a little amorphous. So, and we're also dealing with a very diverse Jewish community, both in terms of denominational selection that people have, and a whole new changing demographic that is emerging around the country of younger folks who are not connecting in traditional ways, who are not joining synagogues, who are not, sending kids to day schools, who are out there yearning for a connection with their Jewish heritage, but may not be finding it in the traditional, institutions that exist.
So you mentioned the word traditional 3 times in this one sentence.
Yeah.
You see yourself as a traditional person?
No.
How do you see yourself?
I don't. I think people sometimes see me as traditional.
Well, you look traditional.
I look traditional.
You look traditional.
I play it on TV, right?
Well, you're wearing the white shirt,
See,
the red.
Well, I knew what to wear, right?
Right,
I've done this before.
Right.
I try not to see myself. I try hard not to be traditional because I don't want to get locked into labels, and I don't want to lock myself or those that I'm working with into being complacent with doing what has already worked. And to me, traditional means you're doing the same thing, which apparently is not uncommon in Connecticut, the land of steady habits, right? And all of that. And maybe that's why I was attractive to the Federation, because I'm not from Connecticut. I'm not, embedded in the Jewish community. I can bring a new, view, an outsider's look, a new sense of energy. From the outside, everything about us is traditional. We belong now to a synagogue, and I have this really wonderful job, but we're still very artsy. My kids are non-traditional. We like mixing it up.
And you're having a good time.
I'm having a great time.
So if you had to tell me if you had to tell the audience one more thing about reinventing yourself, what would you tell them?
Grab the opportunity. Both my wife and I both reinvented ourselves within months of each other. She was an attorney, and she's a development professional, and it works. You can't be frightened about moving into this, area that might seem terrifying. You're going into oftentimes taking on responsibilities and taking on projects that you may not feel equipped to. But what we found is if you're confident and you know the right questions to ask and you can build a support network around you of people who do have the skills and knowledge that you may lack, and know how to use that effectively, then you can be successful.
Well, you've heard it here. Embrace the fear, embrace change. Just be yourself. You just have to do it. Thank you, Howard.
Thank you.
Interesting, so interesting.
My pleasure.